Hello and welcome to the Spittin The Truth Podcast. I am Sports Guru 716 alongside Dylan, and I hope you enjoy today's episode. We're going to cover, as you can tell by the title, the NFL free agency that is going to begin at the end of the month. We will cover, obviously, the Buffalo Bills, as you can tell by my channel name, 716 would mean that. We're going to emphasize Buffalo when we can. So we're going to take a little bit more of a national scope to start. And Dylan, I've been hearing that Mario Williams may be cut. He may not be. What do you think of that? Have you read something to that degree of, are we going to actually cut him? Or do you think a restructuring would be better suited?
I think I've read plenty about this. There's a number of opinions of it. I think we'll end up cutting him because obviously he wasn't the player that we're paying for this last season. And a restructuring would help Buffalo, but he may not want to do that because you can kind of tell at points in the season that he might not really have bought fully into Rex Ryan's system on defense. And going from Jim Schwartz, where the defensive line almost always is rushing the quarterback, running back, whatever, to there were times when he had to play coverage, and he clearly wasn't happy about that, and you could kind of tell as the season progressed that he wasn't happy with the role, and it's like, as long as we're keeping Rex Ryan around, I don't think he's going anywhere just yet. I think that it would probably be better for both parties just to part ways.
I think it would be a smart move to cut him. I don't know. We have a lot of money locked up in our defensive line right now, and it's quite obvious, as we'll get to later, that we have other needs on this team. And in a draft that has a lot of defensive ends and defensive tackles and linebackers that can make immediate impacts, I think this makes sense. I would cut him. I don't think he will consider restructuring. And, he not only did he not buy in, but he also didn't try. And you heard that around the locker room, that Mario wasn't really trying very hard. He wasn't putting in all his effort. And you saw it at the end of the season when he did have some success, that he could have given more effort all season long. And maybe when you think about it, if Mario Williams plays like Mario Williams could have in one or two games, we could have made a run at the playoffs, made a much more significant run, have a winning record, and be better. But due to Mario's slacking mid-season, we really couldn't do that. And regardless of whether he bought in or not, that's unacceptable. And I hope teams around the league see that and say, well, this guy, if you're not doing what he wants, he's not going to put in all the effort. And I also heard that in Houston, before he left, there was a similar problem, that there was a notion around Mario that he was not a team guy and he was more about him. And in which this would prove it if he, half-assed all season long, and then at the end was like, oh, look at me. I think he had a couple sacks in one of the last couple games. I don't remember exactly which one it was, but pretty sure he had a lot of success in one of the last games of the season. And it's disappointing that he would do that. It was our first. It's funny, we're okay with cutting him right now. We're okay with cutting him, but he was the thing a couple years ago. Like, you remember that hype? Like, do you think signing Mario Williams to that contract in hindsight now was a mistake?
Given the way that the end of the situation is likely coming about, I would say yes. But obviously, like, hindsight's 2020. I think at the time it was a great idea. It's like, oh, this star player's on the market, you're going to give him a ton of money. And there was not this past season, but the season before, our defense was one of the best in the league, led by our front four. and obviously some injuries to Williams and a little bit to Darius and a scheme change and everything kind of messed that up. But if we could have kept up with what we were doing the year before last season, then still would have had a dominant defense, and maybe, as you said, we could have done better, gotten a couple more wins, competed a little harder for a playoff spot. And so I don't fault the Bills front office for the idea, but the way this is ending up, you just got to put this one in the L column.
Taking the L on the Mario Williams contract. And it is such a shame because I remember the hype. We were like, Mario Williams is in Buffalo. Oh my God. Like we're able to have a visit by the top free agent of this year. Like this never has happened in Buffalo sports, like during our lifetime, that a player of this stature was willing to even come to talk about it, to even consider it. And I remember like people joking that they must have him at gunpoint because he was here for like 3 days. Like the visit lasted for 3 days, and it was crazy, and there was so much hype, and everyone was so happy, and it's so disappointing now the way it is ending. That he acted this way. The Buffalo community is a group of people that works hard all the time and always feels like the underdog, but is always working 100%. And I know that I feel like I'm in a minority where I appreciate players that give more effort than others that may not be as skilled, especially in hockey. But it's the same thing in football. You look at Kyle Williams, for example. Kyle Williams is not nearly as talented as Mario Williams, but he puts up the same numbers and works twice as hard. And that's why Kyle Williams, wants to live here after he retires. He has said that. He's like, I want to retire a Bill. It's like, I want to retire a Buffalo Bill. Whether they decide that I'm done or I decide I'm done. And, you don't get that from Mario. You get I'm a high-paid player. And, he kind of embraced the city last year during the big snowstorm, helping Jim Kelly out and things like that, being a nice guy in that regard. But right now it's just looking like this guy was here for the money more than, because he liked the area. And, you can't, how much can you fault him for that when he gets paid the most ever at the time for a defensive player? But it's disappointing, to say the least. I'm disappointed by the whole thing. Now, where he will go, I see the New England Patriots name thrown around a lot. And I must say, if that happens, I don't see the Bills making the playoffs next year. And it's because New England will get 100% Mario Williams next year. And that is scary to think about. New England is well known for this. I don't even think we have to go into this, what New England's really going to do. They may or may not sign him, but if they do, and I believe that they will make a run at him, that Bill Belichick will get the most out of Mario Williams, and he will probably be a Pro Bowler. Do you have any thoughts on that? Have you read things regarding New England and Mario Williams and stuff like that?
Yeah, New England's definitely the team I've heard the most about in terms of speculation of where he may go. And it's a scary thought because we're saying, yeah, he had a down year and everything, but we've mentioned the injuries, the lack of effort from possibly not buying into the system. He goes to perennially the best team in the AFC for the last decade. He might be a little more excited, fired up. He'll get to play his former team twice a year. And I still think he's a talented player. I don't know how much money will come into factor with his next contract. I don't know how much money teams are going to be offering him, but I do think there will be interest. Wouldn't be surprised if the Patriots made a move for him, tried to get another star player, so don't put him on that defense and help them out. And I mean, I've heard a few other things. I think I've heard Seattle, because I think they were interested back last time he was a free agent when the Bills got him, but I don't think we let him visit anywhere else. And so I do think, like, the Patriots are the big team being talked about now, but I do think he'll garner interest from a few others who might have a void to fill on their D-line.
If Seattle gets him, things are going to get real over there. Like, it looks like a lot of teams will want him, but a lot of the very good teams want him. And, you know, he's going to have a chance, more than likely have a chance to go for a Super Bowl. And it's a shame he couldn't bring us a playoff berth here. And I think with that, we should talk about the next, you know, big free agent the Bills might get this offseason. You know, the most hyped quarterback from the 2012 draft, as I said, you know, prior to it, Robert Griffin III, has obviously garnered a lot of interest by the media, wondering, where will this guy go? And the three teams I see most are the Cowboys, Rams, and Bills. And it's a real scary thing to think about that we may consider signing RG3. Dylan, I know you're a big RG3 buff, so, you know, do you think that would be a good idea to sign him?
I think it depends. I mean, obviously I'm less outspoken about him than I was. I was a big fan going to the 2012 draft. I loved what he did. His entire rookie season, I loved watching him. He was an exciting player until Mike Shanahan essentially let him go out and destroy his knee in a playoff game. And I don't want to blame the coach entirely, but those injuries kind of knocked RG3 off the path. And you can say how it's inevitable. He wasn't built to be the player he was for a long time in this league. But I do think there's potential still there. But it's not something, like, don't overpay for him. I like the guy, and I would love nothing more than to see RG3 be a successful quarterback again. Well, actually, there's things I'd love more. But I would, if he could come back and be like comeback player of the year, I think that would be fantastic, because I think he's a great talent, and it's been unfortunate that what's happened to him. So I think if he goes anywhere, more than likely he's going to be a backup or maybe compete for a job in some places. I don't know if you mentioned Dallas and Los Angeles. LA is going to have to try to sell tickets, so if they're not keeping with Nick Foles around, then they might want to go with the exciting, flashy player of RG3 after Peyton Manning chooses not to go there. And then the Cowboys, every offseason there's a rumor, Johnny Manziel is going to be Tony Romo's successor. Now RG3 is going to do it. Or maybe Johnny Manziel rumors will come up again because he'll be available. But so I feel like it's all speculation. I don't know how big of an opportunity he'll get where he goes. It might be just as a backup. He might get to compete for a job, but if he could find a way to stay healthy, then maybe he could put up a great year. Be like DeMarco Murray behind that Cowboys O-line and put up a career year. Just needed protection.
I like how you mentioned that he may or may not have been built for a long career in the NFL, because you know that I believe that the way he's built is not conducive for a long career. You see Michael Vick. Michael Vick may have been in the league for a while, but, you know, he had to change the way he played from a run-first quarterback to a pass-first quarterback, and not many quarterbacks can do that and do that successfully and still be a a starting quarterback in this league afterwards. And, RG3, actually, the more you think about it right now, I'm saying RG3 may or may not be a free agent, but, the Redskins may go back to him and ask him if he wants to come back, or because they broke off negotiations with Cousins just recently, so things might get serious over there. But here, I want nothing to do with RG3. I think we have a quarterback that is as good as RG3 was in his rookie season in Tyrod Taylor. It's a time bomb, in my opinion, whether Taylor will last. At last season, we saw it. He was injured multiple times. Now, you can say the one-horse collar injury was not because of him and his size. That was happenstance. But his knees and things like that, he had a lot of problems last season, and I think it was due to his running. And I think this season, Taylor will have to prove that he can be a pass-first quarterback, or at least show signs of it, for the Bills to legitimately sign him as a franchise quarterback. Because I don't think a run-first quarterback, especially built like him, can be a quarterback that you will 100% throw all your eggs in that basket, because you don't know if they'll ever play 16 games. And that's, a franchise quarterback can't be constantly injured. So, RG3 fits our scheme great, if he can still run. That Greg Roman scheme fits RG3. So the scheme works. And I was just thinking, is he better than EJ Manuel? I really don't like EJ Manuel. And it's because Taylor not playing all 16 games makes me have to think, is signing RG3 a good idea just to play a couple games? And I don't know, do you... I feel like I know the answer, and I feel like it's an easy answer, but would you prefer to have RG3 as the backup next season to Tyrod Taylor over EJ Manuel?
Probably, assuming, if you're going to sign a player like RG3, obviously you're going to work him out. He's going to have a physical, etc. So I think a healthy RG3 is a very talented quarterback. There's a reason he went number 2 overall in the 2012 draft, or why the Redskins traded away their future for him and ended up getting their future in the 4th round. But if you work him out and he's healthy, but it's kind of, I think you have to be prepared. You mentioned in the comparison to Mike Vick and not staying healthy. We saw this year, Big Ben got hurt, and Mike Vick went in, played a little bit, and I believe he got injured, and so they had to roll with Landry Jones for a couple of games. And it's like, could you see that happening if R1-2 is Tyrod Taylor and RG3? And then maybe EJ gets the call anyways. But it's something you got to be careful. I said, you need a good offensive line to protect these guys, and I think that's a big priority for us. So it's we're going to have to retain our offensive line at least, if not improve upon it, for, I think, any of these guys to put up 16 competitive good games. Because if we're making them run for their lives every week, then we're just asking for an injury and hurting ourselves down the road.
I think that's a great segue into our next part here, where, who should the Bills re-sign? And there's only a couple players on the list that are really significant. I know I've read on Twitter, at least from Ron Brooks' Twitter, that he wasn't coming back. And, people like Alex Carrington. I know we added Leonard Hankerson towards the end of the season, and he's been decent before, but let's be real. Those guys aren't what we're here to talk about. So, we got 3 big free agents in Glenn, Incognito, and Bradham. And I think that the offensive line has got to be the biggest priority, like you just said, of this team. And the loss of Mario Williams allows you to, I think, you look at your offensive line and you have to think to yourself, you're going to have enough cap to at least look at free agency. Incognito is a Pro Bowl level guard. And Glenn has shown signs of being a very good tackle, but I think that we need to look into free agency before we just settle and sign our own guys. Because last season, there were moments where our offensive line was not very good. And we need to really, really consider that. And, I just really don't want to settle with Incognito and Glenn, more so Glenn than Incognito, if there is something better out there. And I don't know. Are you comfortable with Glenn and Incognito, or would you prefer us to take the look outside of the organization first?
I mean, I'm sure the organization has already done some scouting on what's going to be available. Personally, I thought Glenn and Incognito were pretty good. They would be people who I'd definitely be perfectly fine with keeping around. I mean, it might come down to us having to use the franchise tag on Glenn, but I don't know. I think we're nearing the deadline or around that time for that. But the franchise tag's a big commitment because it's the average of the top 5 at the position or something. So you're tying up a lot of money for Cordy Glenn. And I mean, a couple of years ago, we let Andy Levitre walk, and he hasn't been anything special since he left Buffalo. So you have to you don't want to lose a guard or lineman like Glenn, but you have to gauge whether what you're going to have to pay him is going to be worth it, or maybe if in the draft somehow in one of the rounds, I don't know what Whaley's priorities are between all of our picks, but if you think you can get a good lineman then, or something, or some combination of the above. I think Incognito did really well. He was a big question mark coming into the year, and he kind of I don't really know if I want to say shined, but I think he was really solid and coming in here and doing his job. And you mentioned how he was a Pro Bowler. He filled in, I think he was an injury fill-in for it. But I kind of see both sides of it. You don't want to lose what we have and not be able to replace it, but if you franchise tag Glenn and re-sign Incognito, that kind of handcuffs you in terms of what else you can do this offseason, and you should always be looking for ways to improve, and we might be in a position to not be able to do that.
I think that's interesting to think about, because I didn't know that we were going to consider putting the tag on Glenn, and it makes me wonder if we should just put the tag on Incognito because it'll be cheaper to put a tag on him. Generally, guards are considered cheaper than tackles, especially left tackles. And I know this draft is deep at tackle as much as defensive end and defensive tackle. And I've seen those 3 positions pretty much consistent with the Bills' first-round pick, whether it's Jack Conklin. I believe there's a kid from Alabama. You've got a couple defensive ends, Mendici for one, and many others, and defensive tackles. So it's a thing, and I don't know. I'm not sold on Glenn, and I wouldn't want to give him top 5 money to ensure keeping him around, because it does handcuff us, and we are going to have to answer the bell in other ways. And if we let go of Mario Williams, it's tough, because when you think about it, if we want to let go of Mario Williams, so we're going to have a hole at defensive end. And does this provide Rex the ability to finally play his 3-4 the way he wants to? That's a thing to consider. Putting Kyle Williams at end and Marcel Darius be your nose tackle. Like, that is something that the Jets have done in the past. And if you let Williams go, you have that hole if you want to continue doing a hybrid scheme. And then you have a situation where your tackle and guard are going to have to be paid, because you can't just let the tackle go, because you have to answer the defensive line in the draft as well as the offensive tackle. And, John Miller, we drafted John Miller in the 3rd round last year, and he beat out Craig Urbick for the spot. But according to Pro Football Focus, he sucked. He was a rookie, but he sucked last year. So because of that, you have to really think about, hey, are we going to commit ourselves to a rookie at offensive line? And it's just, I guess I just kind of squashed my whole situation of, hey, why don't we just not sign Glenn and then go draft one? It's a real sticky situation. I think you got to put the tag on incognito and then look around and see if you can get a better tackle, or show Glenn what is actually worth by the open market, unless the price gets ran up and then you lose Glenn. But I don't know. I don't have interest in keeping him around unless we have to. And I also think Bradham is gone. I have no real serious inquiry about Bradham. I think our linebackers were not very good last year, but I don't think Bradham is good enough to make that much better than it was. Towards the end of the season, we were playing musical chairs with practice squad guys at linebacker. So I don't know. I think Bradham has problems off the field, and we need to maybe rid ourselves of him and go look elsewhere. How do you feel about Nigel Bradham and his stock?
I don't think I'd be heartbroken if Bradham was to leave by free agency this year. I mean, you mentioned our linebackers weren't that good, and it's like, I feel like he's not the kind of difference maker on defense that, like, oh, we have to keep this guy. But I think he's somewhat easily replaceable. I don't necessarily know what linebackers are going to be on the market and available, but Rex and Rob are supposedly great defensive football minds, so if in the event that we do have to replace them, the hope would be that they can find somebody who can come in and do a good enough job of coaching them to learn the system and be successful in that role. And I don't think Bradham's a make-or-break player going into next season.
Fun fact, Rob Ryan is not a good defensive coordinator. And that is scary. That is scary because he's going to be with Rex. And Rob has not been good at being a defensive coordinator his whole career. Like, he's always been below average. And it's just not good. That's not good. Yeah, Bradham needs to go. There's a couple guys. I think Trevathan is available. Maybe you can sign a guy like that. If you sign a guy like that just comes off the Super Bowl, that's the type of player you need to get in here. I think, that's the kind of guy we want here, is somebody that's been there, because we really don't have that. We have a very young team, and we don't have that Super Bowl experience, that playoff experience. We literally are a team of players that don't make the playoffs. And that's not good, and we need to really, obviously that's not good, but the truth of the matter is we don't have players that know how to get into the playoffs, know what winning is, know how to win, and know what to do to get a win. And it's we reference it in hockey a lot, especially with the trade deadline coming up. You're looking for that experience to get yourself over the hump in the playoffs and win a Stanley Cup. Or in baseball, you're looking for experience and players that have been there and played under pressure to go win and things like that. But in football, at least for the Bills, we don't get guys like that. Even when we did sign Mario Williams, he was no, guy that led his team to the Super Bowl or had success in the playoffs. He was just a good player that never made it to the playoffs. And I think that we need to change that mentality too within our organization with the Bills. We need players that have been there. You look at the Sabres, and the Sabres are starting to add players that know how to win or know what it takes to win. O'Reilly's been in the playoffs. McGinn's been in the playoffs. Got Georges. Gianta won Stanley Cups. And, I think the Pagulas need to look at what they did with the Sabres and what Murray's doing with the Sabres. And it's not a rebuild that I'm talking about the Bills need to do, but they need to add experience on this team. I think that they are not even recognizing the lack of experience on this team in terms of knowing how to win. Do you have any, what are your thoughts on that hypothesis?
It makes sense to me. I mean, you don't want to have too much inexperience on the side of football. I know it's good to have young team and everything, but you need to bring in some guys who've been there, done that. And we thought we brought in Rex Ryan. He's a coach that's been to the playoffs. So we have a coach that's been and gone on deep playoff runs with the Jets. But you kind of want that sense of experience, that leadership you need. And I think it would be really valuable to our team to add, like in terms of more than just filling a positional need or more than just the talent the player provides, that having that experience, like even if obviously you prefer somebody with like a bigger role, because we can say Tyrod Taylor has a Super Bowl ring from his days in Baltimore, but he wasn't really the biggest factor in that. So somebody who's been there, been on the field, filled their role, done something. It doesn't have to be Von Miller, but somebody who's had success deep in the playoffs would be great, because we're still looking for that playoffs. And sometimes I feel like as Buffalo fans, we could get crushed in the wild card round and we'd still be happy because we made the playoffs. But when we get to the playoffs, we're going to want to do really well. So I don't think we're a fan base that would be too excited about a one and done stop. And I think there are moves that can be made to essentially get us there. But it seems like we've been looking for that for a long time.
I forgot Tyrod Taylor won a ring as a backup. He did a real good job of playing Colin Kaepernick leading up to that Super Bowl. So I think he had a lot of value. He had a lot of value in that Super Bowl win. It's just, and then your other experienced running back, and I don't even want to get into that because that's a Spittin The Truth rant is what that's waiting to become. He's really showing our young guys how to handle themselves in public situations, public places. But I won't get into that because we'll race bait, and I don't want to race bait. It's just, I just think they're not recognizing it. I just think they're not even considering it when they're looking at free agency. Like, they may consider, this player has experience, but I don't think they're looking at, like, this player knows what it takes, like the leadership qualities to do it. Like, I understand. I believe Kyle Williams is a leader. I think Eric Wood is a leader. I think Tyrod Taylor is a leader. They've got leadership qualities, but they don't know how to win, and that's a problem. You need to know how to win. And, you get a bunch of young guys together. They don't necessarily know how to win. Look at Denver. Denver had a very young, well, not a very young team, the more I think about it. But they had players that knew how to win. Peyton Manning. NFL Network did a thing where they had mic'd up Cam Newton and Peyton Manning. And this is nothing against Cam Newton, but this is what happened. First huddle for each team. You listen to Peyton Manning and what he says. He says 3 things. He says, I have 3 things for you guys. 1, breathe. Just breathe. And then he just doesn't say anything for like 5 or 10 seconds. He's just like, just breathe. Calm down. And then 2, he was like, just execute and compete. And 3, have fun. And you may think to yourself, oh, those are things that all players say. That's what all players say. The first one, not necessarily. I don't think they try and like soothe their team like that. It's a Super Bowl. But he said this very calm and collected. And it's his last game of his career, so, he's approaching it very laid back, but still. And then you listen to Cam Newton, and he can barely breathe. He's barely able to talk because he's so hyped and so full of adrenaline and just like bouncing off the walls. He can barely contain himself enough to tell the team to play and breathe and just talk. And that is experienced player in Peyton Manning and inexperienced player in Cam Newton. And I think that's what you need to look at. You need to think to yourself, I want not necessarily a player that may be still in their prime. And I'm not talking go pick up a 40-year-old quarterback, but pick up a guy that has experience, that can tell the team, hey, calm down, soothe the team, and, just execute. I thought that was really interesting. I really did. I don't know if you watch NFL Network often or anything like that, but, what do you think of that?
I actually hadn't seen or heard anything about that part, but it makes sense. Like when you're inexperienced, it's like, well, I think one of our favorite things to say on any show is about how you go to a Super Bowl in your rookie year, you might never go back. And players who have been there, like Peyton, he's won it, he's lost it. He knows that even though he's been there a million times, not a million, but he knows that it's not an opportunity that comes along all the time to everybody, and it's not an opportunity that you want to waste or squander. So it's like, sit back, enjoy this, because from one perspective, you might never be back to this game. And if you get too excited, too amped up for the game, you might be more prone to making a mistake or in some capacity just messing up, and then who knows if you'll ever have the chance to look back. Whereas if you enjoy it, have fun, you can sort of always look back on it fondly, because it's not something, if you overthink it while it's happening and that costs you, then you're probably going to be overthinking it for a long time. So it's not something that you really want to haunt you, and you need those type of leaders to come in and say, relax, have fun. It's not the end you don't really want to say, like, it's not the end of the world if you lose, but you don't want to make them, because it's probably the most important game of many players' lives, but you don't want to rack up the nerves by saying, like, this is the most important game of your life, you might never be back here, because I feel like that's more harmful than saying, relax and play your game, because this is it.
It's just, it was just crazy. Comment below. I forget to say this at the beginning of the video, and the video is closing out. The podcast is closing out this episode, and I think that experience is very important. I think, like, you have key leads but I think experience is our key need. And comment below if you think that's something the Bills should consider, or any team for that matter, if experience really truly can trump some talent to make your team better. And I think we're gonna close out this episode of the podcast. We're at 40 minutes here, so thank you for watching. I hope you liked the video. If you liked it, comment below, subscribe. I know we only have just over a handful of subscribers. I didn't upload many times this week in the beginning of the week. I know I'm doing a NASCAR preview series, and if you haven't seen that, go click on that. Most people hate NASCAR, but hey, I don't care. I'm trying to just do things that I like for a minute here. So, yeah. Thank you for watching, and hope to see you again next week.
Bye.